The February wind cut through my jacket like a blade as I stood on the Interstate 71 bridge, clipboard in hand, watching my breath fog in the bitter air. Below, traffic hummed in both directions, thousands of people trusting that the steel and concrete beneath them would hold. They had no idea how close this particular span had come to catastrophic failure. "Sir?" My junior engineer, Kevin, appeared beside me with the ultrasonic readings. "The stress fractures are worse than we thought." I took the data sheet, scanning the numbers with practiced eyes. 19 years of structural engineering had taught me to read metal fatigue like a book. The hairline cracks in the support beams told a story of gradual deterioration, small compromises that, left unchecked, would bring down the entire structure. "We're shutting it down," I said, pulling out my phone to call the highway department. "Tonight, rush hour or not." Kevin's eyes widened. "That's going to cost them millions in delays." "Better than body bags." By the time I pulled into our driveway in German Village, darkness had settled over Columbus like a heavy blanket. Our Victorian house glowed warm yellow through the winter trees, and I could see Rachel curled on the living room couch, laptop open, tea steaming beside her. I found her exactly where I'd expected, wrapped in her favorite cashmere throw, fingers dancing across the keyboard. She looked up when I entered, and that smile that had captured me 20 years ago spread across her face. "There's my bridge inspector," she said, closing the laptop. "Save any lives today?" "About 10,000 commuters." I dropped into the chair across from her, still feeling the wind's bite in my bones. "Caught a major fracture just before it went critical." "My hero." She set her mug down and studied me with those green eyes that still made my chest tight. "I closed the Peterson account today, 6 figures." "The startup in Austin." Their whole remote team was imploding. Sexual harassment complaints, productivity nosedives, the works. She stretched like a cat, obviously pleased with herself. 3 months of coaching, and now they're functioning like a real company. I watched her describing her triumph, noting the animation in her voice, the way her hands moved when she talked about work. Rachel had built her HR consultancy from nothing, and after 5 years, she was pulling in more revenue than some mid-sized firms. We were both at the peak of our careers, no kids to complicate things, financially secure enough to travel whenever we wanted. Perfect life. Perfect marriage. She picked up a small wrapped package from the side table. "Early anniversary gift." I raised an eyebrow. "February 7th isn't until tomorrow." I couldn't wait. Inside was a vintage surveyor's compass, brass and mahogany, the kind they'd used to map the frontier. The inscription read, "To my true north, R." "It's beautiful," I said, turning the compass over in my hands. The needle swung to magnetic north, steady and sure. "I thought about our wedding," she said softly. "Remember how cold it was? Standing in that little park with snow falling, and you said that we'd build something that lasts?" I looked up at her. "No deviations from the plan." She moved to my chair, settling on the armrest, her fingers combing through my hair. "We did it, didn't we? 19 years and we're still perfectly aligned." Outside, a train whistle echoed in the distance. Rachel's head turned toward the sound, and for a moment, something flickered across her face. A restlessness I couldn't quite read. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. She blinked, refocusing on me. "Nothing. Just... sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just disappear on one of those trains. Go somewhere completely new. We could take a trip. Paris in the spring? Maybe." But her smile seemed forced now. I should finish up some emails. I kissed her forehead, tasting the faint sweetness of her shampoo. "Don't stay up too late." The next week blurred together in the familiar rhythm of our lives. I split my time between the office and field sites, double-checking calculations and managing the bridge closure that had every politician in Columbus screaming about traffic delays. Rachel maintained her usual schedule of virtual coaching sessions and client calls, her home office buzzing with the constant ping of notifications. Saturday evening, we were finishing dinner when her phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown number with a Cincinnati area code. Rachel glanced at the screen and immediately declined the call. "Spam?" I asked. "Must be." But her fingers tightened around the phone and she quickly switched it to silent. I made a mental note of the area code. Cincinnati was where Rachel had gone to college, where she dated that guy. What was his name? Marcus? The one she'd mentioned occasionally in our early years together, always with a dismissive wave. Ancient history, she'd call it. The phone buzzed again with a text. Rachel's eyes flicked to the screen and her face went pale. "Everything okay?" "Just work stress," she forced a laugh. "This client's CEO keeps calling at all hours. Boundary issues." But I caught her deleting the text without reading it, and that nagged at me. Rachel prided herself on her professional boundaries. She'd never tolerate a client who couldn't respect basic communication protocols. Later that night, we sat by the fireplace with wine, and the mood lifted. Rachel curled against me on the couch, her body warm and soft, smelling like vanilla and wine. When she turned to kiss me, there was an urgency there that caught me off guard. "What if we did it?" she whispered against my ear. "Just disappeared together, bought tickets on the next train to anywhere." Her lips found mine, and for a moment, the strange phone calls and worried glances faded away. This was my wife of 19 years, the woman who'd stood with me in a snowy park and promised to build a life together. Whatever was bothering her, we'd figure it out. But as I held her, I couldn't shake the image of that train whistle calling in the distance, and the way she'd looked toward it like it held some answer I couldn't see. The following Friday, I was running late for a site inspection when I grabbed the wrong coat from the hallway closet. Halfway to the job site, I reached into the pocket for my phone and found something else instead, a crumpled piece of paper. It was a train ticket stub. One way to Cincinnati, dated 3 weeks ago. I pulled over and stared at the thin strip of cardboard. Rachel hadn't mentioned any trips to Cincinnati. In fact, she'd been home that entire week, complaining about a difficult client who was demanding round-the-clock availability. When I got home that evening, I went straight to her office. Rachel was on a video call, gesturing animatedly at her screen. "I completely understand the pressure you're under," she was saying to someone I couldn't see. "But we need to establish some boundaries here, or this working relationship isn't sustainable." Professional, competent, the Rachel I knew. I waited until she finished, then held up the ticket stub. Her face went white. "Find any good errands in Cincinnati lately?" I asked. For a moment, she just stared at the paper like it might spontaneously combust. Then she shook her head. "I have no idea where that came from." "It was in your coat pocket." "That's impossible. I haven't been to Cincinnati in years." The lie hit me like cold water. Rachel was many things, but she'd never been a good liar. Her tells were as obvious to me as stress fractures in concrete, the way her voice went slightly higher, how her eyes couldn't quite meet mine. "Rachel, I'm telling you, I didn't go anywhere." Her voice had that edge it got when she was backed into a corner. "Maybe someone dropped it in my pocket by mistake. Maybe it's old and I forgot about it." I turned the stub over. The date was clear. 3 weeks ago. A Tuesday when I'd been in Toledo for a bridge inspection, and she'd claimed to be home all day with client calls. That night, after Rachel had gone to bed, I searched her dresser drawer. Hidden beneath her winter scarves, I found 3 more ticket stubs and a hotel keycard from the Westin Cincinnati. All from the past 2 months. All for trips I'd never known about. I sat on the edge of our bed, watching my wife sleep peacefully beside me, and felt the ground shift beneath me like a failing foundation. For 19 years, I'd believed in the integrity of our structure. We'd built something solid, something that could weather any storm. But now I was seeing the hairline cracks that had been there all along, growing wider with each hidden trip, each mysterious phone call, each lie told with those green eyes looking straight into mine. In my business, when you find stress fractures, you have three choices: reinforce, repair, or demolish. But first, you had to know exactly how much damage you were dealing with. I looked at the train tickets one more time, then carefully put them back where I'd found them. Time to run a full structural analysis. The confrontation came 10 days later, on a Sunday evening that had started deceptively normal. We'd spent the afternoon antiquing in the short north, sharing a late lunch at our favorite bistro, discussing plans for our upcoming anniversary. Rachel seemed relaxed, almost giddy, touching my hand across the table and laughing at my stories about Kevin's latest engineering disasters. But I'd spent those 10 days running my investigation like any structural assessment: methodical, thorough, and documented. I'd found the second credit card she'd opened without telling me. I'd tracked the charges: hotels, restaurants, gas stations, all forming a clear pattern of regular trips to Cincinnati. I'd cross-referenced dates with her calendar and found the fabricated client emergencies and networking events that had never existed. Most damning of all, I'd found the texts she thought she'd deleted. When we got home that evening, I waited until she'd poured herself a glass of wine and settled into the living room. Then I spread everything out on the kitchen island like evidence at a crime scene: the train tickets, the hotel key cards, printed copies of the credit card statements, screenshots of the recovered text messages. "Rachel," I called, "could you come here for a minute?" She walked into the kitchen with her wine, humming something under her breath. When she saw the display, she stopped dead. "Explain," I said simply. For 30 seconds, she just stared. I could see her mind working, calculating what I'd found versus what she could still hide. The engineer in me appreciated the methodical way she was assessing the damage. "Some of this is old," she started. "The credit card bill is from last week." "Okay, but the hotel thing." I called the hotel. "You've had 7 stays in the past 4 months. Always the same room type. Always checking out late Sunday morning." She set her wine glass down with shaking hands. "Ethan, I can explain." "I'm listening." But instead of an explanation, she just stood there, opening and closing her mouth like she was drowning. So I helped her along. "Marcus Fletcher," I said. "Your college boyfriend. The one who's now VP of Strategic Development at Cincinnati Financial. The one who's been married for 12 years and has 3 kids." Her face crumpled. "How did you—" "I'm very good at research." I picked up my phone and opened the voice recording app. "Start talking." And finally, she did. It had started 4 months ago, she said. Marcus had found her on LinkedIn, congratulating her on a business award she'd won. Just friendly at first, old classmates catching up. But then he'd started calling, texting, telling her how unhappy he was in his marriage, how he'd never forgotten her. "It was just emotional at first," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He was going through a rough patch and I was trying to help. You've been so busy with work and I felt disconnected." "When did it turn physical?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "The 3rd time I went down there. We were just having dinner and he kissed me and I didn't stop him." "How many times did you sleep with him?" "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She closed her eyes. 5 times. Maybe 6. I tried to stop it, but he kept saying he was going to leave his wife, that we could start over. "Save it." I stopped the recording and slipped my phone back into my pocket. "Go pack a bag. You're sleeping in the guest room." "Ethan, please, we can work through this. It's not what you think. It was just a midlife crisis. I never meant for it to happen." I looked at this woman I'd loved for nearly 2 decades, this stranger who'd been lying to my face for months while I kissed her goodnight and planned anniversary dinners, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. Every breath you've taken around me for 4 months has been poisoned with lies, I said. Every time you said you loved me, every time we made love, every plan we made together, all of it was contaminated with this. That's not true. I do love you. This thing with Marcus, it's not real. It's just, get out of my kitchen. She tried to argue, but I turned my back and started clearing the evidence from the island. By the time she'd gathered her things and retreated to the guest room, I was already on my laptop changing passwords and security codes for every account we shared. At midnight, I called my attorney. By Monday morning, I had a plan. Richard Vic Rasmussen had been the legal counsel for my engineering firm for 8 years, handling everything from contract disputes to worker compensation cases. He was sharp, thorough, and completely ruthless when the situation called for it. "Jesus, Ethan," he said, after I'd laid out the situation in his downtown office. "She really did a number on you. I need to know my options. Ohio is a no-fault state, so her adultery won't directly impact the divorce settlement. But," he leaned back in his chair, considering, "if we can prove she used marital assets to facilitate the affair, hotels, travel, gifts, that's called dissipation. We might be able to recover those funds, maybe even get you a larger share of the marital property." "What about her business?" "Built during the marriage with marital funds, so it's subject to division. But if she's commingled business and personal accounts, or used business resources for personal gain," he smiled grimly, "that opens up some interesting possibilities. I want to hit her where it hurts most. Her professional reputation? Everything." Vic pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "First things first, we need documentation, financial records, communications, evidence of the affair. I'm going to refer you to a forensic accountant and a private investigator." "Already on it." He looked up, surprised. "You've been busy." "I don't do anything halfway." The private investigator Vic recommended was a former Columbus police detective named Sarah Holcomb. She had the kind of calm competence I appreciated. No drama, just results. "Your wife's not very good at operational security," she said when we met at a coffee shop in Worthington. "I followed her to Cincinnati yesterday. She's sloppy, parks in the same garage, uses the same restaurants, even checks into the hotel under her real name." "What about him?" "Marcus Fletcher. Interesting guy. This isn't his first rodeo." She slid a folder across the table. "I did some digging into his background. 2 previous affairs that I could document, both with business contacts. His company had to settle a sexual harassment lawsuit 3 years ago. Female client claimed he was using business meetings to pressure her into a relationship." I flipped through the photos and documents she'd compiled. Marcus Fletcher looked exactly like what he was, a smooth corporate predator in an expensive suit. The kind of guy who probably had affairs the way other men collected golf trophies. "There's more," Sarah said. "He's currently under FTC investigation for inflating client retention metrics. His company's been using fraudulent numbers to attract investors, and he's the VP in charge of that division." "How do you know that?" "I have contacts at the FTC. Unofficially, they're building a case. Won't be public for a few months, but when it breaks, anyone associated with him is going to get burned." I thought about Rachel, so proud of her professional reputation, her carefully cultivated network of corporate clients. If she got tied up in a federal fraud investigation, what would it take to accelerate that timeline? Sarah smiled. "Depends how much evidence they get from concerned citizens." Meanwhile, the forensic accountant Vic had recommended, a sharp woman named Beth Martinez, was tearing through our financial records like she was auditing the Pentagon. "Your wife's been busy," she told me during our second meeting. "She opened that secret credit card 6 months ago, and there's $47,000 in charges I can't account for. Hotels, restaurants, shopping trips, even jewelry purchases." "Gifts for him?" "Most likely. And here's the kicker, she's been funding it by skimming money from her business accounts. Client retainers that should have been held in escrow, expense reimbursements that never went to actual expenses. It's textbook embezzlement." Can we prove it? Already have. I've got paper trails going back 8 months. She's been preparing for this affair longer than she's probably willing to admit. That evening, I sat in my home office, surrounded by the evidence my team had compiled. Financial records, surveillance photos, hotel receipts, text message logs. All the pieces of Rachel's secret life laid out in forensic detail. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin at work. News says the bridge replacement got approved for emergency funding. Your inspection probably saved the state $50 million in liability claims. I smiled grimly. Funny how detecting structural failure in a marriage required the same skills as catching it in a bridge. You followed the stress patterns, documented the damage, and then you did what had to be done to prevent catastrophic collapse. The difference was, with a failing marriage, you got to choose which side of the demolition you wanted to be on. Rachel had been trying to draw me into conversations all week. Tentative apologies delivered to my back while I cooked dinner. Attempts at casual touches that I avoided without acknowledgement. She'd even left a handwritten letter on my dresser. 3 pages of remorse and promises that I'd thrown away unread. Thursday night, she was waiting for me when I got home from work, positioned in the living room like she'd been rehearsing. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "About us. About how we're going to fix this." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the confrontation. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Her usually immaculate hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of the old protectiveness, the urge to comfort her that had been my default mode for 19 years. Then I remembered the hotel receipts. "There's nothing to fix," I said. "That's not true. People get through this. Marriages survive affairs. I know I hurt you, but..." "You didn't hurt me, Rachel. You destroyed something that took us 2 decades to build. And you did it for the cheap thrill of rolling around in hotel beds with a man who's probably done this to half a dozen other women." She recoiled like I'd hit her. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Enlighten me." "I don't know." The words came out as almost a scream. "I don't know why I did it. I just felt so trapped. Like every day was exactly the same, and I was disappearing into this routine, and when Marcus reached out, it felt like a chance to remember who I used to be." "Who you used to be was someone who kept her promises." "I know that, and I hate myself for this. But I can't undo it, Ethan. All I can do is try to make it right." I studied her face, looking for some sign of the woman I'd married. But all I could see was a stranger who'd been wearing my wife's face while she lied to me for months. "There's no making this right," I said. "There's only dealing with the consequences." She must have heard something final in my voice because her face went pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you should call a lawyer." Friday morning, I was at my desk reviewing foundation specifications when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Rachel's number, but when I answered, I heard a man's voice. "Is this Ethan?" "Who's asking?" "Marcus Fletcher. I think we need to talk." I set down my pencil and leaned back in my chair. "Do we?" "Look, I know this situation is complicated, but Rachel's been through enough. Whatever you're planning, maybe we can work something out man to man." "Man to man?" I laughed. "You want to have a man-to-man conversation about how you've been screwing my wife?" "That's not..." "Look, this thing between Rachel and me, it's real. I know how this looks, but we have something special. I'm planning to leave my wife and..." "Stop right there." I could feel my control starting to slip, and that wouldn't serve my purposes. "You called me. Say what you need to say. I'm asking you to back off. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Rachel wants to work things out with you, but if you keep pushing..." "If I keep pushing what? You'll do something about it." There was a long pause. "I have resources, Ethan. Connections. It would be unfortunate if your professional reputation suffered because you couldn't let go of a marriage that's clearly over." I felt something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. Marcus Fletcher had just made a serious mistake. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to help you see reason. Here's some reason for you, Marcus. Your company is about to be audited by the FTC for securities fraud. Your affair with my wife isn't your first, and the pattern of behavior suggests you've been using your position to coerce relationships with business contacts. That's a federal crime. Silence. Oh, and Marcus? The next time you call my phone, I'm going to record the conversation and send it to your wife. I already have her email address. The line went dead. I sat for a moment, feeling the adrenaline buzz in my veins. Then I picked up my phone and called Sarah Holcomb. It's time, I said when she answered. Whatever you've got on Fletcher, send it to the FTC today. You sure about this? Once I pull that trigger, there's no going back. I thought about Marcus Fletcher threatening my livelihood to protect his sordid little affair. I thought about Rachel, somewhere across town, probably taking comfort from a man who'd just tried to intimidate her husband into submission. Do it. The weekend was quiet. Rachel had gone to stay with her sister Megan, claiming she needed space to think. I spent Saturday morning in my workshop, building a bookshelf for my office with the kind of focused precision that always helped clear my head. Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Megan. Ethan, can we talk? Megan had been Rachel's closest friend since college, her maid of honor at our wedding, the sister she'd never had. If anyone was going to take Rachel's side in this, it would be her. What's on your mind? I need to tell you something, but I need your word that it stays between us for now. That was unexpected. Okay. Rachel's been lying to you about a lot more than just the affair. I set down my coffee mug. I'm listening. She asked me to cover for her 6 months ago. Said she was having lunch with an old friend and didn't want you to worry about her dwelling on the past. I thought it was harmless, so I agreed to be her alibi if you asked. But it wasn't just lunch. No, and it wasn't just 6 months either. Megan's voice was tight with anger. I found her old diary yesterday while helping her pack some things. Ethan, she's been in contact with Marcus on and off for years. Not just recently, this has been going on since early in your marriage. The bookshelf I'd been assembling suddenly seemed very far away. How long? The earliest entry I could find was from 2010. She wrote about how she still thinks about what might have been, and how she sometimes looks up his social media just to see how he's doing. 2010. We'd been married 4 years. We were talking about buying our first house, planning trips to Europe, building the life I thought we both wanted. There's more, Megan continued. She wrote about feeling trapped in your marriage, about how you were too predictable, and how she sometimes fantasized about disappearing on a train to somewhere new. I remembered Rachel looking toward the train tracks that night, the wistful expression on her face when she talked about disappearing. It hadn't been a random thought. It had been a long-held fantasy. Why are you telling me this? Megan was quiet for a long moment. Because you deserve to know the truth, and because Rachel's been asking me to help her manage you through this crisis. She wants me to convince you that this was just a midlife mistake, that she's learned her lesson. But you don't believe that. I think she's been lying for so long that she believes her own lies now. And I think if you take her back, it's only a matter of time before she does this again. After Megan hung up, I sat in my workshop for a long time, thinking about 19 years of marriage. How many times had Rachel seemed distant or distracted? How many business trips or girls' nights or family emergencies had actually been cover stories? How many times had she kissed me goodnight knowing she'd spent the day texting another man? I thought about the compass she'd given me for our anniversary. To my true north. Even that had been a lie. By Monday morning, I was past anger. Anger was messy, emotional, prone to mistakes. What I felt now was something colder and more useful, a crystalline clarity about what needed to be done. I called Vic and told him to file the divorce papers. Then I called Sarah Holcomb. I need you to document everything, every trip, Every meeting, every hotel stay. I want a complete timeline going back as far as you can trace. What's your end game here? Total destruction. The first domino fell on Tuesday. I got a call from Sarah while I was reviewing stress calculations for a highway overpass. The FTC moved fast, she said. They raided Fletcher's office this morning, seized computers, financial records, the works. How do you know? I have a contact at Cincinnati Financial. Word is already spreading through the company that Marcus is radioactive. Anyone associated with his division is being transferred or put on administrative leave pending the investigation. What about Rachel? She's not directly employed by them, so she won't be caught in the immediate blast. But if they find evidence that she was involved in the fraudulent metrics, client testimonials, fake case studies, anything like that, she could be looking at criminal charges. Exactly. And even if she's clean on the fraud side, being linked to a federal investigation is going to destroy her professional reputation. I thought about Rachel's carefully cultivated network of corporate clients, the speaking engagements and industry awards she was so proud of. In the HR world, trust was everything. One whiff of scandal, and her business would collapse overnight. There's something else, Sarah said. Marcus tried to contact your wife yesterday. Multiple calls and texts. She's not answering. Smart of her. Maybe, or maybe she's panicking and about to do something stupid. When I got home that evening, I found Rachel waiting in the kitchen. She looked terrible, pale, shaking, like she'd been crying for hours. Did you know? She asked without preamble. Know what? About the investigation. About Marcus being arrested. Arrested? I raised an eyebrow. That's news to me. What investigation? She stared at me with something like horror. Don't play games, Ethan. This is serious. They think Marcus was involved in some kind of fraud, and they're investigating everyone connected to him. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate? Her voice cracked. My name is going to be dragged into this. My business, my reputation. Everything I've built is going to be destroyed because I trusted the wrong person. I looked at her with genuine curiosity. Even now, faced with the consequences of her choices, she was casting herself as the victim. Not the woman who'd betrayed her marriage, but someone who'd been misled by a manipulative man. You know what's interesting? I said. You're more upset about your business than you are about our marriage. That's not true. Isn't it? When I confronted you about the affair, you asked if we could work through it. But now that your career is threatened, you're falling apart. She slumped into a chair, covering her face with her hands. I know how this looks. But you have to believe me. I had no idea Marcus was doing anything illegal. I never helped him with his work. I never gave him any information about my clients or… Relax, I said. I believe you. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. You do? I think you're too self-absorbed to have noticed if he was committing fraud. You were too busy playing out your romantic fantasy to pay attention to the details. The hope died. Why are you being so cruel? I'm being honest. For the first time in months, we're both being completely honest. That night, Rachel called Megan and asked her to come over. I listened from my office as they talked in hushed tones in the living room, Rachel's voice rising periodically in panic or frustration. Around 10 o'clock, Megan knocked on my door. Can we talk? She looked troubled, conflicted in a way I hadn't seen before. Rachel wants me to ask you something, she said. Go ahead. She wants to know if you'll help her with the investigation, provide character references, maybe help her find a lawyer who specializes in federal cases. I studied Megan's face. What did you tell her? I told her she should ask you herself. But she sent you instead. She's scared of you right now. She thinks you hate her. I don't hate her, I said truthfully. I just don't care what happens to her anymore. Megan flinched. That's almost worse, isn't it? For her, probably. Ethan. She sat down across from my desk, looking exhausted. I know she hurt you. What she did was inexcusable. But she's family to me, and I can't just watch her destroy herself. She destroyed herself when she chose to lie for 10 years about still being in love with another man. Megan's eyes widened. 10 years? Did she not mention that part? The diary entries going back to 2010? She said it was recent, a midlife crisis that got out of hand. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out copies of the pages Megan had found. Vic had advised me to document everything, and Megan had been willing to provide copies in exchange for my promise not to use them publicly unless absolutely necessary. Read them yourself. Megan took the papers with shaking hands. I watched her face as she scanned the entries. Years of Rachel fantasizing about her lost love, complaining about her boring marriage, dreaming about running away to a more exciting life. When she finished, Megan set the papers down and closed her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I had no idea it was this bad. Now you understand why I'm not interested in character references. What are you going to do?" I thought about Marcus Fletcher, probably sitting in some corporate attorney's office right now, watching his career disintegrate in real time. I thought about Rachel, panicking about her reputation while still not seeming to grasp the magnitude of what she'd done to our marriage. "I'm going to let her handle this herself," I said, like the independent woman she always claimed to be. The next few days brought a cascade of consequences. Marcus Fletcher was formally suspended from Cincinnati Financial, pending the federal investigation. News of the scandal broke in the business press, with Fletcher's name prominently featured as the executive responsible for the fraudulent metrics. Rachel's phone started ringing constantly, not with new business, but with existing clients asking worried questions about her association with Fletcher's company. She'd provided HR consulting services to 3 companies in Cincinnati Financial's network, all referrals from Marcus. "They're all canceling," she told me Thursday evening, her voice hollow. "Every single contract. 23 years of building my reputation, and it's gone in a week." "That's the nature of trust," I said, without looking up from my laptop. "Once it's broken, it's almost impossible to repair." "You could help me?" "How?" "Your firm has corporate clients. You could make some calls, vouch for my character." I finally looked at her. "You want me to vouch for your character?" "I know it's a lot to ask, but..." "Rachel, 3 days ago, I found out you've been lying to me for half our marriage. You want me to call business associates and tell them you're trustworthy?" She started crying again. It was becoming a regular occurrence, these sudden emotional breakdowns that seemed designed to elicit sympathy. "I made mistakes," she sobbed, "but I'm still a good consultant. My work speaks for itself. Your work is tied to your reputation, and your reputation is tied to your integrity. You don't get to compartmentalize this. So you're just going to let me lose everything? You lost everything when you decided to have an affair. I'm just not going to help you pretend otherwise." "Friday afternoon," Vic called with an update. "The forensic accountant finished her analysis," he said. "Your wife embezzled $73,000 from her business accounts to fund the affair. Hotels, jewelry, travel, even a weekend in the Bahamas you probably don't know about." "The Bahamas?" "Last month. Told you she was at a conference in Cleveland." I thought back to February, trying to remember. Rachel had come home from that conference with a slight tan, which she'd explained as coming from the hotel's indoor pool. I'd never questioned it. "What are our options?" "Well, technically it's her business, so embezzlement might be a stretch. But she used marital assets to start that business, and she's been commingling business and personal expenses for years. We can make a strong case that the entire business is marital property, which means half of it is yours, including the half she stole to fund her affair." "What's the business worth?" "After this scandal, not much. But before the Fletcher connection became public, she was averaging about $200,000 a year in revenue. Subtract expenses and taxes, and you're looking at maybe 60,000 in annual profit. So I could claim 30,000 a year, or we could liquidate the business entirely and split the proceeds. Given that her client base has evaporated, liquidation might be the more realistic option. I thought about Rachel upstairs, probably making desperate phone calls to potential clients who would never trust her again. Her life's work, reduced to a balance sheet in a divorce settlement. Do it, I said. File for liquidation of the business as a marital asset. Ethan, are you sure? This is going to destroy what's left of her career. Her career was already destroyed when she chose to get involved with a federal criminal. I'm just making sure I don't get caught in the collapse. That evening, Rachel was waiting for me in the living room with a bottle of wine and Chinese takeout from our favorite restaurant. I thought maybe we could talk, she said. Really talk. About what happens next. I looked at the scene she'd set. Candles lit, our wedding photo prominently displayed on the coffee table, soft music playing in the background. It was like a production designed to evoke better times. What did you want to discuss? Us. Our future. She poured 2 glasses of wine and offered me one. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I think there's still something worth saving here. I took the wine but didn't sit down. Such as? 19 years of history. The life we built together. The fact that we still love each other. Do we? She blinked. Of course we do. I never stopped loving you, Ethan. This thing with Marcus, it was just an escape from reality. It wasn't real love. What was it then? I don't know. Nostalgia, fantasy. A reminder of who I used to be before life got so routine. I sat down across from her, curious about where this was going. Tell me about the routine that was so unbearable you had to break our marriage vows to escape it. She took a large gulp of wine. It wasn't about you specifically. It was about feeling like my life had become predictable. Same job, same house, same conversations every night. I felt like I was disappearing into this comfortable but hollow existence. So, you decided to have an affair with a man who's now under federal investigation for fraud. I didn't know about the fraud. But you knew he was married with 3 children, she flinched. That was wrong, I know that. But he said he was unhappy, that his marriage was already over. The same thing he's probably said to half a dozen other women. You don't know that. Actually, I do. I pulled out my phone and showed her Sarah Holcomb's report. 2 previous affairs, both with business contacts, a sexual harassment settlement his company paid to make a lawsuit disappear. You weren't special, Rachel. You were just the latest in a pattern. Her face went white as she read the details. This can't be right. It's all documented. Court records, settlement agreements, witness statements. The man you threw our marriage away for is a predator who probably targeted you specifically because you were vulnerable and had useful business connections. She set the phone down with shaking hands. Even if that's true, it doesn't change how I felt. The connection you had was based on lies. He fed you a story about being unhappy in his marriage, about remembering your college romance, about wanting to build a future together. And you believed it because it was what you wanted to hear. Stop. You wanted to believe you were special, that someone saw the real Rachel underneath the routine of married life. So you ignored the obvious red flags and convinced yourself this was some grand love story instead of what it actually was, a middle-aged woman having a sordid affair with a manipulative criminal. She started crying again, but this time there was anger mixed with the tears. Why are you being so cruel? I made a mistake. I get that. But you're talking to me like I'm some kind of monster. You're not a monster, I said calmly. You're just someone who decided that the promises she made to me were less important than chasing a fantasy. And now you're dealing with the consequences. What if I ended it completely? Cut off all contact with Marcus, focused on rebuilding our marriage. You did end it. Marcus is going to prison. I mean, before that. What if I had ended it voluntarily? I thought about the question seriously. It wouldn't have mattered. Why not? Because this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was 10 years of emotional infidelity followed by 4 months of physical betrayal. You didn't just cheat on me, you lived a double life. People get past affairs. Marriages survive. Some marriages survive some affairs, I corrected. Marriages where one partner makes a stupid, impulsive mistake and immediately confesses out of guilt. Not marriages where one partner conducts a calculated deception for months while looking their spouse in the eye every day and lying. She set down her wine glass and looked at me with something approaching desperation. So that's it? 19 years and you're just going to throw it all away? I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that. What can I do? Tell me what I can do to fix this. I considered the question. Nothing. There has to be something. You could invent a time machine and undo the past 10 years. But short of that, there's nothing you can do to make me trust you again. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. So you're just going to divorce me? I've already filed the papers. The color drained from her face. When? Monday. You filed for divorce without telling me? You had an affair without telling me? I figured turnabout was fair play. She stood up abruptly, knocking over her wine glass. Red liquid spread across the white coffee table like blood. You calculated, cold-hearted son of a… Careful, I said mildly. Anything you say in anger might end up in a court filing. She stared at me for a long moment, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Then she turned and ran upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard her on the phone with Megan, her voice muffled by the bedroom door but still audible. I cleaned up the spilled wine and put the Chinese food in the refrigerator. Then I went to my office and reviewed the latest reports from my investigative team. Tomorrow, the real offensive would begin. The first wave hit Monday morning. Vic filed a motion for emergency asset preservation, freezing Rachel's business accounts pending the outcome of the divorce proceedings. By noon, she was locked out of her own company's finances. "This is insane," she screamed at me when I got home from work. "How am I supposed to pay my contractors? How am I supposed to run my business?" "You're not," I said simply. "The business is being liquidated as a marital asset." "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. You used marital funds to start the company, and you've been embezzling from business accounts to fund your affair. A judge is going to have a very hard time seeing that enterprise as your separate property." She stared at me with pure hatred. "You're destroying my life. I'm protecting my interests in our joint property. If you hadn't stolen $73,000 to spend on hotels and jewelry for your boyfriend, we wouldn't be in this situation. I didn't steal anything. It was my business. A business built with my money, run from a home office I pay for, using connections I helped you build over 19 years of marriage. You don't get to keep the profits while claiming the losses are mine." She tried to argue, but I walked past her to my office. I had work to do. Tuesday brought the second wave. Sarah Holcomb had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Marcus Fletcher's professional misconduct, including detailed timelines of his previous affairs and the sexual harassment settlement. More importantly, she documented his pattern of using business relationships to facilitate personal relationships, a clear ethics violation that I was now sharing with the appropriate professional licensing boards. "Won't this hurt Rachel too?" Sarah asked when we met to review the materials. "Rachel doesn't have a professional license to lose," I pointed out. "She's not a lawyer or a certified HR professional. Her business relies on reputation and word-of-mouth referrals, both of which are already shot." Exactly. Wednesday afternoon, I received a call from a reporter at the Columbus Business Journal. "Mr. Rasmussen? I'm working on a story about the Cincinnati financial scandal and its impact on local businesses. I understand your wife provided consulting services to several companies in that network. I'm not sure I'm the right person to ask about my wife's business relationships. Actually, I was hoping to get your perspective as someone in the local business community." Have you seen any impact on Columbus area firms that had connections to Fletcher's division? I thought carefully about my answer. I think any business that relied on referrals from Marcus Fletcher is going to have to rebuild their client base from scratch. Trust is fundamental in the consulting world. Do you think the scandal reflects broader problems in how remote HR consultants vet their referral sources? I think any consultant who doesn't do their due diligence on business partners is asking for trouble. Basic background checks would have revealed Fletcher's history of ethical violations. The article ran Friday morning with the headline, "Local Consulting Firms Scramble to Distance Themselves from Cincinnati Financial Scandal." Rachel's business was mentioned specifically, along with my quote about the importance of vetting referral sources. She confronted me that evening with a printed copy of the article. "You talked to a reporter about my business?" I answered questions about general business practices. "You made me look incompetent." I stated facts about due diligence. "If you feel that makes you look incompetent, maybe you should examine your business practices." She threw the newspaper at me. "You're systematically destroying everything I've worked for." I'm answering questions honestly when reporters call me. I can't help it if the truth is uncomfortable. That weekend, Rachel went to stay with Megan again. I spent Saturday morning building a new deck behind the house, a project I'd been planning for months but had never found time for. It felt good to work with my hands, to build something clean and solid from raw materials. Sunday evening, Megan called me. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Rachel asked me to do something I can't do." "What?" "She wants me to go public, to give an interview defending her character, saying she was manipulated by Marcus Fletcher and that she's learned from her mistakes." "Are you going to do it?" "No," and I told her why. "Which is?" "Because I read the rest of her diary, Ethan. She wasn't manipulated. She was an active participant. She pursued him as much as he pursued her. And the things she wrote about you?" Megan's voice trailed off. "What things?" "Cruel things. About how you're boring, how you lack passion, how she sometimes fantasizes about what her life would be like if she'd never married you." I wasn't surprised, but it still stung to hear it confirmed. "She wrote about feeling trapped by your success, like she was just an accessory to your career. She resented that people saw her as Ethan's wife, instead of recognizing her as an individual. Even though I encouraged her business from the beginning? She said you were patronizing about it, that you treated her consulting work like a hobby instead of a real career." I thought about all the late nights I'd spent helping Rachel develop business plans, the professional connections I'd introduced her to, the financial support I'd provided during her lean startup years. Did she mention any of that in the diary? No. It was all about how underappreciated she felt, how you didn't understand her real self, how Marcus made her feel alive in a way you never did. "Thank you for telling me." "Ethan, I'm sorry. I know this is hard to hear, but I thought you should know what you're really dealing with." After Megan hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the woman I'd been married to for 19 years. Not the woman I thought I knew, but the woman she apparently really was. Someone who could build a fantasy narrative where she was the victim of an unsatisfying marriage, rather than someone who'd simply chosen to betray her commitments. Monday morning brought a call from Vic. "We need to talk," he said. "Your wife hired an attorney." I expected that. "It's Rasmussen, Beck and Associates." I raised an eyebrow. Rasmussen, Beck was one of the most expensive family law firms in Columbus, specializing in high-asset divorces. "Where's she getting the money?" "Good question. My contact there says she put down a $50,000 retainer." "With what funds?" "I froze her business accounts." "That's what I intend to find out. Can you meet me this afternoon?" At Vic's office, I found him reviewing a stack of legal documents with Beth Martinez, the forensic accountant. "Your wife's been busy," Beth said without preamble. "She liquidated her emergency fund, cashed out her retirement account, and took a second mortgage on the house." "Without my signature?" Ohio allows one spouse to encumber joint property under certain circumstances. She claimed it was for business purposes. I felt a familiar cold anger settling in my chest. How much? 120,000 total. The retirement account penalty alone cost her 30 grand. So she's willing to destroy our joint assets to fund her legal defense. Gets worse, Vic said. Rasmussen, Beck is known for scorched earth tactics. They're going to try to drag this out, run up legal costs, and make your life as miserable as possible. Can they? Depends how much money she's willing to spend. But yeah, they can make this very expensive and very public if they want to. I thought about Rachel, probably sitting in some mahogany-paneled conference room right now, spinning her story for a team of expensive lawyers. Poor victimized wife, manipulated by a predatory man, now being punished by a vindictive husband who couldn't forgive one mistake. What's our counter-strategy? Vic smiled grimly. We accelerate the timeline, force them to respond to our motions before they can build their narrative. How? We're filing for emergency dissolution based on financial misconduct. The embezzlement, the secret credit cards, the affair-related expenses. We're going to argue that she's actively dissipating marital assets and can't be trusted with joint property. How long will that take? If we can get an emergency hearing, maybe 2 weeks. Do it. Wednesday evening, I was reviewing structural plans for a new shopping center when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus Fletcher's number. "You son of a bitch," he said without preamble. "Marcus, I heard you were having some legal troubles. You know damn well what you did. The FTC raid, the professional licensing complaints, all of it traces back to you. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Don't play innocent. You destroyed my career to get revenge for your failed marriage. Your career was destroyed by your own criminal conduct. I just made sure the right people knew about it. You have no idea what you've started. I've got lawyers working on this, and when they're done, you're going to wish you'd minded your own business." "Funny thing about lawyers," I said. "They're expensive, and from what I hear, your assets have been frozen pending the federal investigation. How exactly are you planning to pay for this legal war you're threatening?" Silence. "Here's some free advice, Marcus. You should focus on not going to prison rather than making empty threats against the people who exposed your crimes. This isn't over. Actually, it is. You're done. Your company is going to fire you to avoid liability. Your wife is going to divorce you to protect her assets, and Rachel is going to testify against you if it helps her avoid prosecution. Rachel would never. Rachel will do whatever serves Rachel. Surely you figured that out during your affair with a married woman." I hung up and blocked his number. Friday morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. Sarah Holcomb called with an update on the FTC investigation. "They're moving to criminal charges," she said. "Fletcher's looking at wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy. The U.S. Attorney's Office is going to announce the indictments next week." "What about Rachel?" "She's in the clear on the criminal side, but the civil investigation is going to drag on for months, and anyone associated with Fletcher's operation is going to be under scrutiny." "Meaning?" "Meaning her business is finished. Even if she wins the divorce and keeps her company, no legitimate corporation is going to risk hiring someone connected to a federal fraud case." I felt a grim satisfaction. Rachel had made her choice. She'd chosen Marcus Fletcher over our marriage. Now she could live with the consequences of that choice. The following Monday, Rachel's attorney filed a motion that made me laugh out loud. "They're claiming emotional distress," Vic told me over the phone. "They want damages for the mental anguish you've caused by exposing her affair. They want me to pay her for catching her cheating? It's a Hail Mary play. They know they're losing on the financial issues, so they're trying to muddy the waters with claims that you've been vindictive and abusive. What's their evidence? Your systematic campaign to destroy her reputation and livelihood. They're arguing that you went beyond protecting your interests and actively sabotaged her career out of spite." I thought about this accusation. Was it true? Had I gone beyond what was necessary to protect myself? Probably. Did I care? Not even a little. What's our response? Truth. Everything you did was a direct response to her misconduct. She embezzled money to fund an affair, and you took steps to protect your financial interests. She associated with a federal criminal, and you made sure the appropriate authorities were aware of relevant information. And if the judge thinks I was vindictive? Then we argue that some vindictiveness is reasonable when your spouse of 19 years betrays you with a criminal and steals your money to pay for hotel rooms. The emergency dissolution hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning in Judge Patricia Hendricks' courtroom. I'd appeared before Judge Hendricks on construction disputes before. She was smart, no nonsense, and notoriously impatient with lawyers who wasted her time. Rachel's attorney, David Rasmussen himself, was exactly what I'd expected. Silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of smooth courtroom presence that rich people paid for when they wanted to avoid consequences. Your Honor, Rasmussen began, my client is the victim of a vindictive campaign by her husband to destroy her life and career because she made one mistake in an otherwise exemplary 19-year marriage. Judge Hendricks looked unimpressed. What kind of mistake? A brief affair that she immediately regretted and tried to end. Instead of attempting reconciliation, Mr. Rasmussen embarked on a systematic effort to destroy her business and professional reputation. By doing what? Rasmussen launched into a detailed recitation of my crimes, hiring investigators, sharing information with federal authorities, speaking to reporters, filing for asset freezes. When he finished, Judge Hendricks turned to Vic. Your response? Your Honor, Mr. Rasmussen's client embezzled $73,000 in marital funds to conduct a 4-month affair with a man who is now under federal indictment for fraud. Everything my client did was designed to protect his financial interests and ensure that relevant authorities had access to information about potential criminal conduct. What about the business liquidation? The business was built with marital funds and is therefore marital property. Mrs. Rasmussen cannot simultaneously claim it as her separate asset while using marital funds to operate it. Judge Hendricks reviewed the financial documents Beth Martinez had prepared. After 10 minutes of silent reading, she looked up. Mrs. Rasmussen, did you or did you not use marital assets to fund personal expenses related to your extramarital affair? Rachel's attorney whispered something to her, but she shook her head and stood up. Your Honor, I made mistakes. I know that. But my husband is trying to punish me by destroying everything I've worked for. That wasn't the question. Did you use marital money to pay for hotels, travel, and other expenses related to your affair? Rachel looked like she was about to cry. Yes, but no buts. Yes or no? Yes. And did you open credit accounts without your husband's knowledge to facilitate this spending? Yes. And did you lie to your husband about your whereabouts while conducting this affair? Yes, but Your Honor, people make mistakes. That doesn't mean— Judge Hendricks held up a hand. Mrs. Rasmussen, you've admitted to financial misconduct, deception, and breach of fiduciary duty to your spouse. The fact that you call these things mistakes doesn't change their legal significance. She turned to Rasmussen. Counselor, your client has admitted to the core allegations in the petition. On what basis should I deny emergency asset protection? Rasmussen tried to argue about proportionality and vindictiveness, but Judge Hendricks cut him off. I'm granting the petition for emergency dissolution. The business assets are frozen pending final resolution. Mrs. Rasmussen, you have 30 days to provide a complete accounting of all expenditures related to your affair, and you're ordered to reimburse the marital estate for those funds. Rachel burst into tears. Furthermore, Judge Hendricks continued, any future dissipation of marital assets will result in contempt charges. Mr. Rasmussen, your client's financial conduct has been reckless and potentially criminal. I suggest you advise her accordingly. Outside the courthouse, Rachel confronted me on the steps. "Are you happy now?" she screamed. "Is this what you wanted? To see me humiliated?" I wanted to protect my assets from further theft. It wasn't theft. It was my business. A business you built with my money while lying to my face for 4 months. You could have been reasonable. We could have worked this out privately. We could have, if you'd been honest from the beginning. But you chose to hire expensive lawyers and fight me instead of accepting responsibility. Her face was red with anger and tears. What happens now? Now you pay me back the $73,000 you stole, and we divide what's left of our assets. And if I can't pay it back, then you'll owe me that money until you can. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she'd lost. 19 years, she said quietly. 19 years, I agreed. All destroyed because you couldn't keep a promise. I walked away and left her standing on the courthouse steps. The final chapter began 2 weeks later with a phone call from Megan. "You need to see this," she said. She sent me a link to a podcast called Corporate Confessions. The episode was titled, "How I Lost Everything to a Federal Fraud Investigation." Rachel's voice filled my office as I listened to her tell her story. But it wasn't the story I'd lived through. In Rachel's version, she was a successful businesswoman who'd been manipulated by a charming sociopath into a brief, emotional affair. She'd tried to end it multiple times, but Marcus Fletcher had threatened her career if she cut contact. When she'd finally found the courage to confess to her husband, he'd vindictively destroyed her life out of spite, using his professional connections to sabotage her business and her reputation. "I made a mistake," she said in the podcast. "I trusted the wrong person, and I let my emotions cloud my judgment. But I never deserved to have my entire life destroyed because of it." The host was sympathetic, asking leading questions about economic abuse and financial retaliation in divorce proceedings. Rachel painted herself as a victim of both her manipulative lover and her vindictive husband. But then, toward the end of the interview, someone else joined the conversation. "This is Megan Thompson," the host said, "Rachel's former sister-in-law and best friend. Megan, you have a different perspective on these events?" "I do." Megan's voice was steady, matter of fact. "I've known Rachel for 20 years and I love her like a sister. But the story she just told isn't what actually happened." The temperature in the podcast seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Rachel wasn't manipulated into this affair," Megan continued. "She pursued it actively for months. She asked me to lie to her husband to cover her tracks. And this wasn't a brief emotional connection. She's been fantasizing about this man for years." "That's not true," Rachel protested, but her voice had lost its confident tone. "I have her diary, Rachel. I've read the entries going back to 2010. You wrote about feeling trapped in your marriage, about wishing you'd never gotten married, about wanting to escape with Marcus to a more exciting life. Megan, please. You wrote about your husband like he was a burden you couldn't wait to shed. You called him boring, predictable, passionless. And when you finally got caught, you immediately started planning how to manage him through the divorce to minimize the damage to yourself." The host tried to interrupt, but Megan wasn't finished. "Rachel lost her business because she was associated with a federal criminal, not because her husband was vindictive. She lost her marriage because she betrayed it deliberately and systematically, not because she made one mistake. And now she's trying to rewrite history to avoid taking responsibility for her choices." There was a long silence. Then Rachel's voice, smaller now. "Megan, how could you do this to me?" "Because someone needs to tell the truth, and because Ethan deserved better than what you gave him." I turned off the podcast and sat in my office for a long time, feeling something like closure settling in my chest. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Rachel got the house, along with the second mortgage she'd taken out to pay her lawyers. I got most of the financial assets and retirement accounts, minus the money she owed me for affair-related expenses. Her business was officially liquidated, with the proceeds split between us. After legal fees and debts, her half came to about $12,000. Marcus Fletcher was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $2 million in restitution. His wife divorced him and moved to California with their children. Rachel tried to restart her consulting business under a new name, but the podcast and the Fraud Association had made her toxic to corporate clients. Last I heard, she was working for a temp agency doing basic HR administration for small businesses. 3 months after the divorce was final, I was inspecting a bridge replacement project on the outskirts of Columbus when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Ethan, it's me." "Rachel, I know I probably shouldn't be calling, but I needed to tell you something." I waited. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For all of it. For the affair, for the lies, for trying to blame you for the consequences. You didn't deserve any of that." "No, I didn't. I know it doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did to our marriage, to you, it was unforgivable." "Yes, it was. Do you think—" Her voice broke slightly. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? Not now, maybe, but someday?" I looked out at the bridge construction, watching workers lay the foundation for a span that would carry traffic safely for the next 50 years. Good engineering was about building things that lasted, that could weather any stress without failing. "No," I said finally. "I don't think I will." She was quiet for a long moment. "I understand." "Rachel?" "Yes?" "Don't call me again." I hung up and blocked her number. 6 months later, I was dating someone new, a structural engineer from Cincinnati who understood the importance of solid foundations and honest construction. We took things slowly, building trust one conversation at a time. I sold the house in German Village and bought a smaller place near the river, with clean lines and no hidden compartments for secrets. I kept the surveyor's compass Rachel had given me, not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder that some gifts come with hidden costs. The bridge I'd saved from collapse was reopened the following spring, reinforced and redesigned to handle whatever stresses the future might bring. I attended the dedication ceremony and watched thousands of cars pass safely over the steel and concrete I'd helped engineer. That night, I burned the last reminders of my marriage: photos, letters, the diary pages Megan had copied for evidence. I watched 19 years of history turn to ash in my backyard fire pit, feeling lighter with each flame. Some structures, once they've suffered critical damage, can't be repaired. The safest option is controlled demolition and a fresh start on solid ground. I had learned to design things that last. Rachel had blown the bridge. Now I was building something new,